All right, welcome back to Chapter 7, the Americas. We're going to be looking at the Aztecs today. This is still part of actually Section 1. We're looking at the peoples of Mesoamerica or Central America. The Aztecs certainly are. They are modern-day Mexico City. They lived and flourished during the 1400s. They adapted many of the Mayan beliefs, their gods, their written language, their calendars. Um, this was one of their gods, Quetzalcoatl. He was believed to be a snake that was also a bird and a man. Kind of a lot of things there. Probably had some sort of a complex, not knowing what he was supposed to be. Anyway, they believed Quetzalcoatl was kind of going to return one day, and that's kind of what's going to lead to their downfall. When we get into chapter 16, we're going to see the Spanish conquistadors coming to the Americas and conquering them. They were also really, really big on human sacrifices. This was kind of at the heart, no pun intended, well, I guess the pun was intended, of their civilization. They sacrificed people to the gods. They offered the gods their living hearts for nourishment. And the Aztecs' society was based around that idea. Again, here we're looking at the pre-Columbian sites, the sites before Columbus gets here. And we're looking right in here in this purplish area. This is the Aztec Empire. Over here in Guatemala is the Mayan civilizations. And you see on here somewhere there's Tikal right here. Tikal, the great city. Chichen Itza, another important major site. Here we have Tenochtitlan, which is going to be the capital of the Aztec Empire. Later on going to be Mexico City. And we see some of their great advancements, their temples, pyramids, writing systems, hieroglyphics, all of that stuff. Well, why do I have this picture? What is this picture of the Mexican flag? Why is this in my handouts? Well, obviously the Aztecs were from Mexico, or they at least came to Mexico at some point, and it was legend that their priests were told to look for a sign. And when they found this sign, they would know that they were where they were supposed to be. In the late 1200s, they went searching for this sign, and they were told that they would find an eagle perched on a cactus holding a snake in its mouth. Now that's kind of cryptic, but they found it. According to legend, they found this place, and it just so happened that it was on this very small island in the middle of a lake. A very small island in the middle of a lake. And they're like, this is where we have to build our civilization, in the middle of a lake? And the priests were like, I guess. And so from that legend and from these people's great work, they built this huge, massive city with over 200,000 people would live on this lake. And it was a very, very intricate construction project, and we're going to be looking at that in class, how they did it. Well, here is what it looked like. You got this big lake, and in the middle of this lake, we built a city. And we built these causeways, these roads that led out from the mainland to Tenochtitlan. And this is another artist pictorial of what it looked like there. Out here, we're going to call these things chinampas. We're going to talk about them too, what the chinampas are. And there they are, these nomadic ancestors. The Aztecs migrated into the Valley of Mexico. They found this lake, and Lake Texcoco, and they built Tenochtitlan. Becomes their capital city. Within 200 years, they became the most powerful force in all of the Valley of Mexico, and everybody was afraid of them. All right. Through conquests, fear, and different alliances that they made with other people, especially two other really strong power, they became like a triple alliance, with the Aztecs being the most powerful of these three groups. By 1500, the Aztecs had built an empire that spread from the Gulf of Mexico to the Pacific Ocean and numbered approximately 30 million people. What was their government and economy like? Well, again, nobles and priests like the Mayans. However, they were different from the Mayans because they had one single king. Where the Mayans were like the Greeks and had all these different kings or chiefs for all the different city-states, the Aztecs had but one leader. One of the most famous, well, there's two by this name, but the first, Montezuma the First and Montezuma the Second, were their two famous rulers. Commoners made up most of the empire. These were like the farmers and the slaves and the people that were working on growing the crops. They're the ones that built the empire, built all the great buildings, kept the economy running. And how on earth did they build and grow food on a lake? Well, what they did is they didn't have beasts of burden or large animals or complex tools. They had like sticks, long reeds, and they took earth. And they filled these structures up. These are kind of made of mats, and they bound them all together, stuck these long poles into the ground, bound them, and filled them with earth, filled them with dirt, and then planted crops on them. And these are located all over, as you can see, all over this lake. And they tied them and bound them to the bottom of the lake so they didn't float away, and then they could sail from one to the next on a little canoe and grow their crops and harvest their crops. And, of course, corn and beans and squash were their major crops. And these are called chinampas. And this is, again, a way that this culture adapted to their environment. They also had steppe farming, just like the Incas and the Mayas and the Chinese. They also too had steppe farming. They did the whole slash and burn thing. So they got chinampas, they got slash and burn, they got steppe or terrace farming. They had it all. All right, very, very sophisticated understanding of the environment. Again, when you're farmers, you figure out ways to farm. It's just what you do. Here's the structure of their society with the slaves on the bottom, common people, nobles, emperors, advisors, and then what was called the great speaker. He spoke for the gods. He was their king or their emperor, and there was his crown. As I said before, human sacrifice was at the central part of their religion. It was incredibly complicated, yet very interesting set of beliefs. The stories we have are filled with human sacrifices. They were very demanding gods and goddesses. And this legacy that they left behind will continue to be studied for years to come. As a part of the religious Aztec legend, there's this belief in this hierarchy of gods. And remember, the hierarchy is step by step going up. Lower gods, middle gods, upper gods. And the top three gods were Huitzilopochtli, Tezcatlipoca, and Quetzalcoatl. The hummingbird, the smoking mirror, and the plumed serpent. Below these three gods, those who practiced the Aztec religion believed there were four sub-gods and an infinite number of gods who were below the four. So you have three at the top, four right below them, and then an infinite number below them, which are very lesser gods. Maybe we, as in our culture, maybe we think of them as like angels or things like that. Well, the Aztec religion believed that one of these gods was the god of rain. There was also the god of growth. And so they also believed that you needed to keep these gods happy. These gods were very demanding. And so one of the things they demanded were human sacrifices. And they believed that the gods fed off of human beings. That's how the gods survived. And if they didn't have humans, the blood of human beings, they would die. And so one part of the Aztec religion was to participate in bloodletting, which is basically intentionally harming and drawing blood from the body. And the higher you were up in the Aztec religion, the more blood you were expected to give. So you might think, well, you'd be a priest and you're made. No, the priest had to give more blood than anyone else. The Aztec gods and goddesses also required the living hearts of humans for nourishment. All right, all hearts were good, but the best hearts, the best hearts were from the brave captives that were considered, that were captured in battle. So when you fought a battle, you did your best not to kill your enemy, but to capture your enemy, because then you could use those enemies as sacrifice. Those warriors, those brave men who fought on the battlefield, their hearts nourished the gods the best. All right? So they had to develop intricate ways of fighting to not kill people, because they thought just randomly killing people in a battle would be a waste of life, because you're not nourishing the gods if you don't do it ritually. So they always sought captives. Sometimes the religion, they just sacrificed one person. Other times they would have to sacrifice hundreds or even thousands of captives were sacrificed at once. Each sacrifice took place the same way, as you see up here at the top of a temple. All right, it was very ornamental. They were placed on an altar. The priest made an incision in the rib cage and removed the living heart. The heart was then burned, and the corpse was pushed down the steps of the pyramid, rolled down the steps, and let his blood drip all over the steps. Sometimes, however, if the person had been a very brave warrior, instead of just kicking or shoving them down the stairs, they would actually be carried down as a sign of respect. Now, there is a special form of human sacrifice that was performed for the god Quetzalcoatl. This ritual was slightly different. Quetzalcoatl was the Aztec god of warmth, death, and cold. He was responsible for light and darkness, and for foods during time of famine. As a part of the Aztec religion, special sacrifices were held for him. The victim was first thrown into a fire, but before he died, he was pulled out of the fire using these long hooks. And just before dying, his heart again was removed from his body and thrown back into the fire. This was a way that they kept the world alive. They believed if they did not do this, the sun would no longer come back out. The stars would turn into monsters and come down and devour all of civilization. They believed that these sacrifices brought peace and balance to the universe. And without them, the universe would die. They also had this idea that if you were slain in battle, you went to a great place. You became a star in the sky. The warriors became one with the god Camaxtili and became stars in the universe. Very complex religion. And that is at the heart, again, a pun intended, of their civilization and what they're most known for. All right, running out of time here, so I want to go quick through this. They had one ruler, like I said before. They traded all over because they were able to conquer so many places, keep them in fear. They were able to travel long distances. Again, we mentioned their religion, Huitzilopochtli, human sacrifices on this massive scale. They had schools where the sons of nobles went. They had priests and astronomers just like the Mayans had. They made gold and silver objects, but not for trade, more for just decoration. How did they die out? Well, at the very height, the pinnacle of their civilization under Montezuma's revenge, the Spanish arrive. The Spanish conquistadors show up, and they defeat them using their advanced technology, using other native allies, because these allies didn't like the Aztecs. So they helped the Spanish to overthrow the Aztecs. They kidnapped Moctezuma II. They held him ransom. They got as much gold and silver as they could get for him. And then, in the end, they executed him. After they took as much as they could, they executed him. It wouldn't be long before the Aztecs would die out. Many of them would become slaves. Many of them would die out from disease, mostly smallpox. that was brought over accidentally. And when we get to the later chapters, chapters 15, 16, and there, we're going to see all of that a little bit more. Next time, Incas, South America.